You're now watching the Danny Mac Podcast on the Bet Rivers Network.
And welcome back to the Danny Mac Podcast on the Bet Rivers Podcast Network. Week 2 is here already, and hopefully it gets here really fast this week after trying to digest the Bears' slow start against Tennessee Sunday. It's a win nonetheless. The Texans were winners on opening day as well. They beat Indianapolis. The Texans are my pick to represent the AFC in Super Bowl 59. And with Week 2's matchup, Sunday night, the topic, let's bring in the Hall of Famer, John McClain, the veteran sports writer, many years the Houston Chronicle. He's been covering sports in Texas since it became a state many years ago. John, thank you for the time today and welcome on board, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
These are exciting times for fans of Houston Texans football. Last year, the offensive and defensive players of the year as rookies, and CJ Stroud has picked up right where he left off. He was terrific against Indianapolis. How impressed have you been with the start to his career?
Well, I'm shocked at what happened last year. We didn't see anything in the offseason, preseason camp. We knew he'd be the starter, but we didn't see anything that made us think he could be as good as he's become. They started 0-2, and then they went to Jacksonville, won by 20, and then they killed the Steelers to go 2-2, and all of a sudden, okay, that's why they're so high on him. And he's been really good, and they've added talent around him. Last year, they were 10-7. They've been pathetic 3 years before that, mired in controversy with firing of Bill O'Brien, Deshaun Watson, all those civil lawsuits against Watson. And then Jack Easterby, that was a failed experiment. So it seems like they had 13 bad years in a row, even though it was just 3. And they caught everybody off guard last year in DeMeco Ryans' first season as coach.
Yeah, he did a terrific job in year one. And it seems like he quickly, and yeah, the quarterback has a lot to do with this too, but he quickly has made the Texans a destination. You get Joe Mixon, who had an awesome start against the Colts on Sunday in week 1, and Stephon Diggs. People want to play for this guy, don't they?
They do, and it goes back to when DeMeco played 10 years, his first 6 here. I've known him since the day after he was drafted. And I used to tell him, man, you're going to be a coach someday. And he would just smile about it, but he just seemed that way. A leader. Players gravitated to him during the locker room and meeting rooms, they told me. And then, of course, on the practice field. And when his career ended, Robert Saleh, who had been with the Texans for 6 years, calls him up. He was helping coach his defense at his high school in Alabama and said, Kyle just got hired by the 49ers. Would you be interested in coming out here and working with us in quality control? And he thought about it and said, sure. So Saleh talked to him about it, and then he told Shanahan. Shanahan called him, and he went in quality control. And the other quality control on the other side of the ball was Bobby Slowick, who had worked with the Shanahans in Washington. And they became best friends and had a pact. One that gets head coaching job first takes the other as a coordinator, and that's what happened. Ryans has put together a really good coaching staff, and that's one reason Stroud has developed. They have Slowick calling the plays, Gerard Jefferson, former quarterbacks coach, and behind the scenes, Case Keenum, the much-traveled Case Keenum, has served as a mentor to him. So they've had 3 really good guys working with him, and of course, Stroud loves to give credit to other people, and it all starts with Slowick.
The best price of 2017 was Case Keenum, $2 million to quarterback the Vikings, and he was just a near miss from going to the Super Bowl. They had an early lead on the Eagles, but wound up getting the doors blown off in that NFC title game. But I love Case Keenum and what he can bring to the table. What specifically is Slowick's approach with his young quarterback? Because we're in the process here in Chicago of feeling out the relationship between coordinator Shane Waldron and first-year player Caleb Williams.
First thing, Slowick came from the 49ers school of coaching because he'd been with the Shanahans. So we knew he was going to come in here and bring that outside zone scheme to the running game, and they had to get some pieces to make it work. And when his first time he'd been a coordinator, first time he'd been a play caller, and he spent a lot of time with Stroud and they got off to a slow start. And Stroud told us, he said, I wish Bobby let me throw the ball down the field more. So Bobby let him throw the ball down the field more, and that's when the offense and Stroud really took off. And they game plan based on what the opponent does. Like they've been working on the first two game plans since the off season, and now the Bears defense, which played so great, and of course special teams, they'll have a plan for them. And I'm sure now that the Bears see them run the ball the way they did, 216 yards, 159 by Joe Mixon, caught us all off guard. The way the offensive line, which was very suspect to me, the ran block. They were great at run blocking, but they had problems protecting Stroud, who had to throw on the run a lot. And Slowick, he's good to adjust. Those adjustments start in the first quarter. He interviewed for some head coaching jobs like D'Amico Ryans after 1 year as coordinator with the 49ers. He interviewed and said, you know what, I got to go back. I need more experience as a play caller. And that's what Slowick did. And I figure Slowick will be gone for a head coaching job after this season because he's really sharp in the adjustments he makes, the way he treats the players, and he's just very, very creative. That's going to be very attractive to a general manager and an owner.
You alluded to the offensive line having protection issues in week one. Is that the potential Achilles heel for this Houston team?
It certainly was against the Colts. The Colts have beaten them up for quite a while. The Colts have a really good front four. Now, they got steamrolled by the run, and they were on the field for 40 minutes. The Texans had the ball for 40 minutes, and so they wore down. They were just flat tired in the fourth quarter, and Mixon just pounded them. And one of the things that most impressive about Mixon, his longest run was 13 yards out of 30 carries, so no long runs to help pad that stat. So, yes, they had protection issues for Stroud, especially inside, but it was weird. It was like a tale of two tales. And because they were able to do a great job run blocking and a mediocre job in pass pro.
The Bears defend the run pretty well. Last year, they made progress in the second half of the season. They had a really easy road to their last 8 games last year, and I think it needs to be qualified when you're beating the Josh Dobbs of the world and Taylor Heineke. It's life is good. Their only really impressive win last year was against Jared Goff, but I think this is a tough matchup for Chicago. And it's the home opener for the Texans, and I'm sure Houstonians are jacked for the occasion on Sunday night. What do you see, if anything, getting in the way of Houston staying clean at 2-0?
I think they would have to have turnovers, and one of the best things that Stroud has done is avoid turnovers. Last year they had the fewest turnovers in the league, which is amazing to have a rookie quarterback playing as much as he did and throwing as much as he did. But he's been very, very smart with the ball. He's very accurate. So if something were to happen where they, say, fumble, Mixon had a couple of fumbles, something happened like it happened against the Titans where you get 2 touchdowns, not by the offense, something like that. If you run the ball a lot, the game's going to be close. And then when you got a close game like the Texans have, anything can happen. Anthony Richardson threw 3 balls that were deep that got behind the safeties, and they fought for the ball, and they couldn't come down with it. So that was the worst thing that happened on defense. They shut down Jonathan Taylor. He had 48 yards, 3 a carry. He had averaged 135.2 in his career against the Texans, 4 games in a row with at least 143, and they totally shut him down. But Richardson killed him on those 3 deep balls. And so I would guess we would see Caleb Williams going deep to test them early, take a quick drop and just launch it. Richardson's big and strong, and he moves around. And a lot of that was they were all over him. That first pass he threw that's been all over the internet and TV and radio and everything. Unbelievable. Where he had pressure on him, he slipped and he threw off his back foot, and it was a perfect bomb, 60 yards, and air traveled in the air, I think 67.5 yards. And so I'm guessing Caleb Williams will try it early to see if the Texans are going to have the same vulnerability.
I'm not sure it's fair to ask you much about Caleb Williams, but I will anyway. Are your expectations in line with most of football America that he is a can't miss prospect?
I've been watching him since he was at Oklahoma. I'm a big Lincoln Riley fan, mainly from offense and what he's done for quarterbacks, going back to when he was coaching at Texas Tech. And then, of course, I watched him at USC where he had no defense. But yes, he is an incredible prospect, and he's been that for quite a while. I watched every minute of every Hard Knocks, which I've done since the show was first on HBO. I was impressed with him behind the scenes. Of course, they have to prove everything that goes out there. And I like the way he sounded after the game Sunday. He didn't care about statistics, and he knows he didn't play well. And it just seems he's got an air about him, and they've added weapons for him. But I think it's very unfair to put expectations of playoffs on a rookie quarterback. Texans didn't have that at all with Stroud last year. He came in as a rookie starter and he played well. I never thought about the playoffs until the last game because if they lost at Indianapolis, they wouldn't have made it. But they won, and then they won the division when Jacksonville was upset by Tennessee. But seldom did anybody talk playoffs after being so bad. But I understand after the way the Bears played at the end of last year defensively that it's hard not for the fans to have those expectations. But it just seems like as they continue adding around him, and I think Paul's done a terrific job of adding players. And I think next year you'll get the best out of Caleb Williams because those guys usually make their biggest improvement between the first and second season. And that's why we're eager to see Stroud and what he does to take that next step.
Mm-hmm. I'm one of those who expects the Bears to be in the thick of things for a playoff berth. They're in a difficult division, as you know. Detroit's division to lose probably, and with the Jordan Love injury, who knows how Green Bay shakes out. But with everything they did, Ryan Poles, you mentioned, what he's done to put people around him. The offensive line's a big problem, and it was Sunday against the Titans, but with everything they've got for him, why not set the bar high? I mean, Stroud was not a consensus number one, and he threw for more than 4,000 yards in just 15 games. Given good health, I think it's a reasonable expectation for Williams to finally unseat Eric Kramer from 95 as the Bears' single-season passing leader. That record's got to fall at some point. Why not this year, John McClain?
I would expect that next year is when that 30 touchdown mark is finally going to be reached. 4,000 yards could finally be reached. Of course, so much depends on the weather and a kid that played at Oklahoma and USC, how he adjusts to the wind coming off the lake. And then, of course, when the weather gets bad. But Caleb Williams got everything you want mentally. Everybody loved the guy. He was a consensus number one everywhere. Last year, Bryce Young was consensus number one, but he had a terrible team around him. Now he's got a terrible team again. They have not done like Ryan Poles and found talent to place around him, at least not based on what we saw in their first game, getting humiliated in New Orleans. So I think the Bears, hopefully that they can take advantage of Jordan Love being out. And because none of us know how long he's going to be out. As you know, it's what you do in November and December, now January. So whatever happens early can be overcome. But I can certainly understand the excitement in Chicago with all those Bears fans wanting to see this team bounce back and be a contender again.
John, I want to ask you big picture about the fans in Houston. You've been there a long time. Hell, I read about you earlier this week that you covered Gordie Howe when he was with the WHA's Arrows. And boy, you're speaking my language with the WHA Arrows and Chicago Cougars in the finals one year. But with all the suffering Houston football fans have incurred and losing the Oilers without ever tasting a Super Bowl appearance, and the Texans, who have gone 5-7 in 12 playoff appearances, that's respectable for their youth, relatively speaking. What would it mean to the city if the Texans were to play in Super Bowl 59?
Houston hasn't won a championship since the Oilers won the first two in the AFL in 1661. Houston has not had a team in the AFC championship game since the Love You Blue Oilers in 1979. The Texans have all those playoff seasons they've won the AFC South, they've won their playoff game at home and lost on the road. They've never been beyond the divisional round. And I don't think they're a Super Bowl contender. I think that'd be more like next year. They got to prove they can actually get beyond the second round. And it would mean a lot, of course, because the fans have suffered. And those last 3 years when they were awful, and it felt like it was 13 or 30 because of all the issues off the field. A lot of controversy. And now it's smooth sailing with D'Amico Ryans. Nick Casario's done a tremendous job bringing in players. I wrote a column Sunday about all his first-year players who came in trades, like Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs, and then some others that he had trades, free agency, in the draft, how all of them contributed to that victory in Indianapolis. And so people here are really excited. This is the first time they've played at home since they waylaid the Browns in the wild card round last year. So people are pumped. And when I saw that boneheaded play by Will Levis and the touchdown return, I thought, almost excited as Bears fans, in NBC, because NBC can now say, we have the unbeaten Bears and the unbeaten Texans led by their great young quarterbacks, Caleb Williams and CJ Stroud. And so that's the way they're going to pump it up. And I think people will be excited to see the quarterbacks, not just in Chicago and Houston, but all over the country.
You're so right. And I'm glad you brought it up because we're going to gnash teeth on that in town until the ball goes in the air Sunday night. It took that type of a break for the Bears to emerge with a win. They weren't prohibitive favorites, but geez, that was a terrible play. I don't think there was a more disappointing loss given where they were in the game, up 17-0 before the Bears finally scratched with a field goal in week one than what the Titans did. I mean, that is just unacceptable. I don't care if you're on the road with a second-year quarterback and a rookie head coach. That was dreadful.
Yeah, Matt Eberflus, you know what that meant to him to come back from that kind of deficit and score touchdowns on special teams and defense. And yes, he knows the offense has to play better. But, man, next time you're preaching when you're behind, you've done it before. Nothing beats experience. I think that's a great experience for a young team with a lot of young players that's playing a schedule that's difficult in a tough division, and I think it'll serve them very well. And it might serve them very well on Sunday night because if they get in a situation like that, all he's got to do is remind them what happened against the Titans. But I don't think that CJ Stroud's going to make a boneheaded play like Mr. Mayo did, trying to say he was throwing it in the dirt. It doesn't look like the dirt to me. If you're throwing it in the dirt, throw it in the dirt. It looked like one of the worst decisions we'll ever see.
Stroud didn't turn it over against the Browns in round one last year. He did not throw an interception against the Ravens. They got beat badly, but he does take really good care of the football. I think there's a lot of good things ahead for Houston fans. When I get a veteran writer on like you, John, and it's an honor to talk to you, I want to ask you big picture. In your time in Houston, for the four most enjoyable athletes you've covered. Now, maybe they were football players, maybe they weren't, but you've been there a long time during your long career. Texas Hall of Fame sports writer John McClain, who were the four guys who would be on your Mount Rushmore? And you don't have to talk at length about them if you don't want to, but guys whose careers you really enjoyed and enjoyed covering the stories that they authored themselves.
This is my 48th year covering the NFL for the Chronicle, but my first was covering the original Arrows with Gordy, Marty, and Markow, which was a story that transcended sports with Mr. Hockey coming out of retirement with the Red Wings to play here. And as I always like to tell people, and I didn't know jack squat about hockey when I came here and got on the beat, and there was no internet to learn, and I learned the hard way, and I wouldn't change that experience for anything. Traveling around two countries with Gordie Howe, I tell people learning hockey from Gordie Howe would be like learning the Bible from Jesus. So Gordie's got to be up there. Earl Campbell, one of the greatest running backs in NFL history. It was a pleasure covering him with the Love You Blue Oilers. And then Warren Moon. Like Earl, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Warren came here from Canada. He was an unrestricted free agent, got a record contract, 5 years, $5 million. And people are like, oh my God, you're paying that guy $1 million a year. And he went to the playoffs 7 years in a row. Couldn't get by the divisional round. Bruce Matthews, who to me is one of the greatest offensive linemen in history, another first ballot, started equivalent of a season at all 5 positions in the offensive line. Watching him work, covering him, knowing him like I do right now, he would be my fourth one.
Okay. Magic Johnson has 5 heads on his Mount Rushmore of NBA coaches. He added Steve Kerr. He didn't know he added a 5th, but he said, yeah, Steve Kerr's on my Mount Rushmore, and then he rattled off 5 names. If you were to add a 5th, would it be J.J. Watt?
Had to be JJ because JJ was a character. He was booed when he was drafted in 2011. Fans didn't want him. I've never seen a player do more off the field than he did. And he got a lot of publicity for it, and a lot of people call him a publicity hound around the country. But usually it was things that people exposed behind the scenes, like the police union called me, said, I thought you might want to do a story on something J.J. Watt did for some families. And I asked Watt, and he said, please don't. And so I didn't. And so there were a lot of things he did, and he was a great player. He'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Right behind him would be Andre Johnson. But Watt was so fun to cover because he was great, because he was fun, great interview. Sometimes when he would lose, he was even better because he was so devastated. But watching what he did for so many people after Hurricane Harvey down here, knowing him the way I do, it would be J.J. Watt.
I loved his career as well. The guy responded to a personal message I sent him on Twitter in his second year in the league and came on my radio show in Chicago. I mean, guys don't do that. I was a Wattian from year one and remember vividly that 19-10 win over the Bengals in the wild card round, the T.J. Yates era in Houston. So that's your next Hall of Fame enshrinee for the Texans, and that'll be a good one because I'm also a sucker, John, for civic pride. When an athlete in one sport shows up to support, as JJ did with the Astros during their success and what he did with the tragedy there, as you mentioned, I'm all for guys like that. And so what if he's a moth? We need more guys who do good things in the community.
I asked Watt early in his career, I said, why do you do so many things in the community? Like if people were in a hospital, there was a case of a couple who was killed in a car wreck and their 2 kids were paralyzed and they were in a hospital, got all kinds of attention here. And I noticed in the bottom of the story from the Chronicle, and new Texan J.J. Watt visited the Berry kids. And I asked him, I said, do you know that family? He said, no. I said, what were you doing up there? He said, well, we're doing the lockout, and I thought, maybe I could go up there and cheer him up. Now he's really close with them all these years later. And I asked him, why do you do so much? He said, look, I'm single. I don't want to sit around on the sofa watching Sports Center all the time. When I get married, then I can do that. So I want to do as much as I can. And he did. And now he's married, but he's still doing a lot of it.
Yeah, I really enjoy him. All right, moment of truth. Are you in the prediction business still? Who wins Sunday night?
I'm picking the Texans to win this game 27-20.
27-20. That would be a Houston cover. The number at Bet Rivers today is 6.5, and it would, I think I saw the total of 46. John, a pleasure to visit with you. Thanks so much. Enjoyed the information and your opinions. Continued success in semi-retirement. Keep talking football, man.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. Good luck to all those Bears fans this season.
That's John McClain for many years with the Houston Chronicle, and he still keeps his eyes on the Texans. He does a bunch of radio appearances every week in Houston, and a guy who won the 06 Dick McCann Award at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I want to thank Adam Delavid, who runs the show for Bet Rivers. Sam Michael is my executive producer. Randy Merkin is the guy who handles all of our A-list guests, and we also say thank you to the guys behind the scenes. who do a great job with promotions and development, guys like Troy Mocker out in D.C. and Alex Pastor. Have a great weekend. Good luck to the Bears. I'm Dan McNeil. Thank you for listening, and thank you for watching, those of you on YouTube. Take care.